Artbeat is brought to you by the City of San Antonio Department of Arts and Cultural Affairs and the EHM Foundation. This week, Artbeat peers into the world of the first artists of Texas, whose awesome murals are found in rock shelters near Del Rio, where the Rio Grande, Pecos, and Devil's Rivers converge. According to famed anthropologist and Texas Indian expert W.W. Newcomb Jr., these complex polychrome paintings are absolutely irreplaceable human documents. Shrouded with the dust of centuries, embellishing walls of shelters and overhangs which peer vacantly at the desolate, sun-scorched canyons of the lower Pecos River country, is a stunning array of rock paintings.
For me, this is not only important as a repository of art, but as a reminder of cultures and systems of thought very different from our own, that have a very valuable heritage that we today can learn a great deal from.
I think the most important thing about this art is the fact that it illustrates the complexity of these people's mythology and their worldview. And it shows that there was a continuity between people and their desire to have explanations for things. And so it links us to these people over time and space, and even over different biological populations and different heredities, and shows that despite your ethnic differentiation, there's still a basic core of humanity that questions the universe.
It was painted there because it helped to tell the story. It was a page out of the Bible or the Quran or any other religious document. So it was there for a purpose.
For San Antonio photographer Jim Zintgraff and University of Texas archaeologist Dr. Solvi Turpin, the ancient artwork, painted long before the pyramids rose in Egypt, has incessantly beckoned. For over 40 years, they've examined, mused, and theorized about Lower Pecos rock art.
Certainly they were the first Texas painter. They were here 10,000 years ago, and they did art on the walls, and that's what we call art.
I think it was the product of a religious or belief system that was in effect for thousands of years, and it reached its culmination, sort of its peak, in this artistic style. There is no doubt that these were accomplished artists. You cannot walk to that cave wall and make a painting on this irregular surface and make it symmetrical without a great deal of talent. There's a tendency to compare these paintings to the great paintings of France and Spain because they are painted by hunters and gatherers who had an animistic religion that believed that life permeates all aspects of the environment, and they are religious art or ceremonial art. But there's a big difference between the two, not only in time, because these are much more recent, but in terms of these are a public presentation. And the caves of France and Spain were private. They're in dark, secluded sanctuaries and probably limited to a very specific segment of the population. This is public art that was intended as an information system and therefore as to be presented to the entire group.
The fact that we call it art, they didn't. And we call it art because how else would we describe something painted on a wall? So to us it is art. To the people that put it here, it was a pattern of life. It was a way of believing.
Santa Fe resident and philanthropist Jeffrey Bronfman is a member of the Rock Art Foundation, created to preserve and protect the murals.
There's a kinship here. There's a sense that I feel very at home here. The images that are here, the spirit of the land, something feels very familiar. I feel very happy when I'm here. I think that the pictographs represent an ability of this culture to learn from the natural world and appreciate the different elements that are present within the natural world. They look perhaps to the eagles to symbolize flight into other realms of knowledge, to be perhaps closer to the heavens. And then they looked at and studied the panthers and their power and their strength and their ease of movement and their agility, and they aspired to that. They looked perhaps at the deer and saw the humility and the grace and the ease of movement, and they aspired to those attributes.
For rock art aficionados, White Shaman Shelter manifests the most spiritual and mesmerizing artwork.
Back in the 50s, when I was with a couple of men over on the Pecos River and we were looking at sites, I wanted to climb up a little higher, and they were kind of discouraging me because it was hot and it was a rough climb, but I insisted on going. When I went up there, I found the White Shaman, and that to me has been the most significant spot on this whole area, and is a beautiful painting. And surprisingly, it's amazing. That site faces the west, and the sun beams on it every day. It's exposed to real harsh weather, and yet the colors are brighter there than any other place. It was a beautiful experience, and I've never forgotten it.
Shamanism is the religion of hunters and gatherers, or rather a belief system of hunters and gatherers, and it's rooted in the time primordial when there was no division between human beings and the animal kingdom or their environment. And people could be animal or human and could shift back and forth to the spirit world. There was no gender, no male, female, everything was sort of unitary.
The shaman figure appears in nearly every shelter.
His job is to find where are the animals, where is the food, why isn't it raining, who made me sick, where should we go on our next trip, should we make this voyage to the meeting, what should I paint in my vision? And he has an animal familiar that helps him along this way, and that's what you're seeing in the paintings most of the time.
In the early 50s, Jim Zintgraff began exploring the rock shelters.
I got started by coming out here at this very place, looking for airheads and helping to dig some of the holes you see behind me. And I'm not very proud of that, and I work very strong now to keep that from happening again, because at the time I had no idea I was destroying the very evidence that would tell us about these people.
The White Shaman Shelter holds special significance for him.
There's times when I almost feel their presence. It's not unusual at all for me to go to the White Shaman and take my hat off and turn around to see if somebody's standing there with me. I feel a very strong connection between the people that are long past and to us today. That's a good one right there. Look at when I came to this shelter the first time and saw the pictographs here, I was so taken back by it that I laid down my digging tools and walked back to the car, which was a good way, and got my camera. And I quit digging and started making pictures, and I've been photographing them ever since.
Zintgraff shares his interpretation of White Shaman.
I had never seen anything that had as much to say as this particular panel says. And I don't speak from an archaeologist. I'm not an archaeologist. I speak from the heart. And I speak from what I see and what I feel in this particular site. If we're talking about this panel right here, we know that mortal man was black in his soul and full of sin. We know that white stands for purity. The white is the representation of his soul, which is leaving his body and going to heaven. We know that figures that have feathers on them, helping him to ascend to heaven.
they were describing the cosmic supernatural landscape to the people that look at it. I think you can see this in a number of paintings where we see the concept of a universe that's divided between a spirit world and the regular world. And we have paintings of the shaman going from one world to another. So in that way, it illustrated cosmology.
We know they were here 10,000 years ago, and we know they were pretty well gone about 1,200 years ago. And we find no place where they went. We find no description of what happened to them. They're just gone.
One of the most common questions that asked is, who were these people? Because people want to identify them as Comanche or Kiowa or Apache or some group that they know of from historic records. But we don't know what they called themselves. We don't know what their name was. So we call them Pecos Man. We believe that we have our science, that civilization is the distance we can put between ourselves and the rest of the world. Can we fly to the moon? Can we have air conditioning? Can we microwave our food? We consider the civilization to be represented by our technology, and so we judge them by their technology, whereas, as a matter of fact, their complexity lay in the lands of the spirit and of the mind rather than in material goods.
Visiting White Shaman shelter is a spiritual experience for Jeffrey Bronfman, who has worked for over 12 years to preserve the spiritual traditions, art, and culture of the Native American.
There's an atmosphere there. You feel like you're in a shrine. It hasn't had the traffic of, tourism. It existed without many people knowing about it. And you walk in there and you just feel that it was a very special place. And the kind of images that were left behind there they're very evocative.
Bill Worrell, an artist from New Art, Texas in Mason County, stumbled upon the paintings while canoeing on the Pecos 15 years ago when a sudden storm forced him to take cover in White Shaman shelter.
I didn't discover the pictographs. Certainly, they've been known for eons or decades, scores of years. But it was just a transforming experience for me. I'd been a landscape painter and did a lot of kinetic sculpture, and that forever changed the focus of what I would do in the future. No human in the world, I'm convinced, is skilled enough to accurately capture the exactness of this pictographic art. I tried to replicate them. I tried to document them. I used photographs I'd taken. I used my memory. I looked at photographs that Jim Zentgraf had taken. I did a lot of work on clay. I actually made rocks out of clay, and I would paint when the clay was still green. I would use various oxides, manganese dioxide, titanium oxide, ferrous oxide, and mix those up like watercolors and paint on the clay, and then let it dry, and then I would fire those rocks. And I did this type thing for at least 5 years before it dawned on me one day that I have gold and silver and bronze to work with. And these people didn't. And had they had that, they would have used it too. And it became clear to me in my own mind that I had been serving an apprenticeship to these people. And they were my teachers, and I graduated.
Familiar with Bill Worrell's adaptation